Now this is the slide where I am open to questions.
So I wrote a couple of things down, but it was O shot, P shot, and what was the other one?
G shot.
G shot, okay.
And so for the women's sexual health procedures, we would here in Langley we would take your name on a list. We could do it very privately, and then we would schedule a time when Dr. Lotz would travel from Kelowna.
And then when you talked about the ranges, like the normal ranges, do we have because I've done that a whole bunch of times, right? You go into the doctor, exactly what you said, no, you're fine. You know, I went to a neurologist, he told me, oh, are you sure it's not just menopause? I said, well, yeah, it is. You know, like, I'm looking for some help. And he blew me off, right? Like, so, you know, what questions are we supposed to ask? What are we supposed to tell them?
You know, that's a good question, and I'm not trying to knock the neurologist here because I'm a specialist as well. So the issue really is in our medical system is as you become a specialist, you only want to deal with whatever your specialty is. So as a neurologist, you only want to do with nerves. And actually, I see many of my cardiology colleagues that if you go there with chest pain, they're like, no, it's not from your heart. Well, what is it? It's not from your heart. Like that's the answer. But that's not really what you as a patient are looking for, right? And so I get it. I get why. I'm actually really surprised that they said, are you sure that it's not just from menopause? Because actually that's better than some neurologists who would say it's not your nerves. At least they gave you some idea. Now, who do you go to? That's the ultimate question. Right? So who do you go to? The best answer or the ideal answer would be you go to your general practitioner. Right? But the problem is again, and this is not a knock on anybody of my colleagues because I was trained here, but we're just not trained for these. And to give a little, I'm going to be a little bit of a tangent here and a little spiel, but our training here in North America is very dependent on, not very dependent, it is completely dependent on disease, okay? So we match symptoms with the disease. If we can't match symptoms with the disease, therefore, we don't know what it is and we tell you you're normal, okay? We run some blood work and we say, is there any disease in there? And they're like, nope, no disease, you're normal. Or something else, you're stressed. That's another one, right? You're stressed. And that's not a knock on people. It's just, that's our training, okay? And it takes someone to go and step outside of that and say, and listen to the patient, right? And say, okay, well, you know, I kind of feel like you may be exhibiting some symptoms that are similar to something else that I think you have, but your blood work shows that you're normal, but I don't think you are. And it requires that sort of additional thought to get to that level, right? So as an example, I also work in the ICU, so I'm an ICU doctor. And part of what I was seeing during the early parts of COVID was, sure, I would help them keep them alive, and then afterwards they would get this long COVID syndrome, right? And then everyone was like, what do we do with this? I don't know. And I was like, holy, these guys, they have a lot of similarities to my hormone patients. Like they have a lot of brain fog, they have a lot of fatigue, and they have a lot of, poor motivation, right? And I said, you know, their hormonal cascade is destroyed. And so that's what I began treating them with, right? I began repairing their hormonal cascade. Now, it doesn't take away everything. You know, part of long COVID is this recurrent chest pain and trouble breathing. And so I know athletes who can't even walk up a set of stairs, right? Hormone's not going to fix that. But I know what that problem is. That problem is from fibrosis in the lung, right? Scarring in the lung. But the point is that it takes someone to sort of think about the potential causes and for someone to see it from all sides, because I saw it as the inflammatory cascade when they were really sick in the ICU, and I saw the kind of havoc it wreaked, right? And so it only made sense that the hormonal cascade is destroyed.
Just briefly on, I'm stage 4 endometriosis, and I've had endometriosis my whole life.
Yes.
And I've been advocating for myself. I'm now perimenopausal, and I'm on prometrium, and everything that I found out so far, like I've had to advocate, and I went to a naturopath doctor to get pelvic health and help with my own. She was the one that actually prescribed me the prometrium, because my GP just wanted to give me antidepressants.
Yep.
That was her response to menopause, just perimenopause.
Yep.
And so I've been on prometrium and taking handfuls of vitamins, which I'm sure all of us are doing some sorts of swallowing pills every day in multitudes. But I think there's lots of information out there that I think is the main concern for me anyways, is how do we live our lives on a daily basis and make choices for ourselves that help us manage those hormones so that we can live comfortably? Because you have to go and pay to get extra blood work to find out what's wrong with you. You have to pay to find, everybody has to go out and pay extra money out of pocket because our basic medical system does not provide that information for us. And so I think the biggest thing, for me, is I'm like, okay, well, what's the healthy way that I should be starting my day? What meals, what food, how am I supposed to heal my body other than just the medications that are being prescribed to me by doctors? Because there's got to be more to it than that. It can't just, popping pills is not the answer, because I'm still feeling like shit. I'm still tired.
Great
you know
comments.
What I'm saying? So and then in my own research, I found out, well, you shouldn't have coffee first thing in the morning on an empty stomach because it raises your cortisol levels, which then screws with your hormones throughout the rest of the day. Did anybody know? There's no information out there telling women don't have coffee on an empty stomach in the morning, but what do we all do? The first thing we do in the morning is get up and have a coffee first thing as soon as we wake up, and nobody tells us that that's the worst thing you can do for your hormones. So I think for myself anyways, it's finding information so that I can lead a healthy lifestyle. Do you know what I'm saying? And manage my hormones daily myself and understand how to manage my own body and my own symptoms without having to pay thousands of dollars a year to help somebody tell me what medicines to take.
Yeah. That was a very that was a statement that had a lot of impactful statements, and so part of that I'm gonna address in what I'm gonna briefly talk about in a bit, which is longevity. Part of that you're not gonna like my answer is there is no solution in Canada because our system is funded and it's built for reactive medicine. And I
get that. I completely understand that. Believe me.
Yep.
I have stage 4 endometriosis. I've been struggling with it my whole life. I've been advocating for that. People that wanted to give me nothing but hormones throughout my entire life to mask symptoms of something I felt in my body that I said to doctors, I don't feel right. And I don't think birth control is going to solve my problems. But they continued from doctor to doctor to try to give me the same thing. Every doctor wanted to mask my problems with the same one Band-Aid, no matter who I spoke to. So, I know that that's the problem, and we can't get answers from doctors. But it's how do we cope with all this stuff?
Can I share a little bit of my experience just with an age patient that was 7 years sick?
Yeah.
I've actually gone back to my doctor's with all the test results, and they still won't agree that they're true. But he's changed my life, he saved my life in a matter of 3 months of first working with GP, and now I'm a year later, and every single person around me is like, you were like what you were 20 years ago. Like, what the fuck are you doing, basically? Just went to GP and ageless because he looks for answers. But one thing I will say is, as much as I want to spend the $500 or $600 on the test or whatever, get all your testing done in the US. Ageless offers that. You get your testing done, and it's done in the US. You get real answers, and there's some testing here. But I just would say, don't get any testing done. I just had my appendix out in the US in Mount Sinai, and that experience, what the amount of information they gave me, because that's what the amount of information I got out of a CAT scan down there, or a scan versus what I got out of the hospital here, 2 different things. So I would say invest in the testing through Longwood Ageless Clinic, where you get real answers, that a doctor that will, because now I get treatment in Canada that's affordable, because the treatment in the US my treatment here with that, well, it's phenomenal. It's under like $200 a month and I'm dealing with right now, maybe 100 something, and all my symptoms are under control. And I don't have symptoms and everything, like I don't have medical symptoms, but then also, like, I have when I know what I have answered, I give him the right answers, and someone's gonna address it, and you just keep going and going, like he said, first, me being the first one, he's like, this is really complicated. I have no idea on these few things right now, but I do know these things, so let's start here, and I need more time, and then we'll come back for the rest of the answers, but I just gotta go deeper, and you may have to do a bit more tests. But like, by the time I got through that 3-month period, I had actually had all the answers, and I was already starting to feel within 2 or 3 days of starting treatment that he prescribed. So as frustrating as it is, meetings that it's being classes we're paying right now, and then the woman that went 7 weeks, I went through the point where I couldn't even lie down in a bed with pain in my organs. So I just say, like, looking at it from that perspective is like, it sucks, like, okay, but at least you get the right answers, and then you can have a doctor like JP that will actually give you what you need from those answers as well, because the other problem, you get the test results and they do nothing. So, it just, I'm 2 years in now, right, with ageless, so that would be my experience firsthand. And even the other just came, I just, wow, you look amazing, and she's seen me since COVID. I'm like, yeah, it's this guy. So, that's why she's here tonight. So, I just wanted to interject as a real person that's living this versus just a doctor, because I think the front of patients speak to each other about this stuff.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's just,
Yeah.
but, you know, I've had all the blood work and hormone and thyroid, I've been and had all those paid testing done.
Dr. Lemon, maybe you can talk a little more broadly about how we can best utilize our publicly funded system in conjunction with what you do and what the potential costs are. Like how do you marry the private part of your business with the public part of our system?
Or maybe you could explain how you're different than going to see a GP.
Yeah, I'm going to answer both. So navigating the public-private is very tricky, very tricky. And I would say that when I see patients, it is strictly private, okay, in this capacity. If I see you in ICU, that's totally different. But in this capacity, when people see me at Ageless, and I never mix patients, okay? But if there is an abnormality that we identify, okay, I point it out, and I tell you then to take that abnormality, what it means, and go into your family doctor and get them to investigate and refer. And I tell you who they should refer you to, okay? That's the best way I could do. I cannot take that and begin investigating it myself through the public system because MSP will audit me, okay? And then they will more than slap me on the wrist because that's bad.
If you've got like hormonal imbalances, isn't that something that is serious? Like, isn't that something that the doctors should look at and say, hey, you know, her cortisol levels are super, super high, and her estrogen levels are super, super low, or her testosterone levels, like, doesn't that mean that in essence, those things are affecting us, and that is something the medical system is supposed to help us with? Other than if I have cancer, right? And I have 10 years.
Yes.
Like, this is ridiculous.
It is, and again, I don't want to necessarily get off topic because that's a very complicated question, and that has to do with our system, and we know that the system is broken.
If I have a mole that's too big, then I can medically get it removed. But if I have a mole that's too small, it costs $700 to get rid of it.
That's right.
Right? So that doesn't make any
We're just
sense.
not there
That's
yet.
right. That's right.
But I mean, we're in it right now. That's why we're here.
That's right. And I don't have an easy answer for that. And to go and answer your question, there's really nothing I can do to tell you that I'm better besides telling you that I'm better. Right? And so,
You to get all the testing and stuff done, what is that procedure compared to going to your GP?
so the procedure is to get a comprehensive test of your hormones, and then I would look at it. So people always ask me, it's the same with any service-based industry, right? It's always very hard to gauge the service that you're getting. Okay, you go and you pay a lawyer $1,000 an hour versus you pay a lawyer $150 an hour. Can you gauge that the $1,000 an hour lawyer is provided you with better service? Hard, right? Hard, very hard. What I can say is, and Crystal has advocated for me as a patient, but what I can say is that for me, I have a genuine interest in preventative medicine. Okay, and I have an expertise in complex patients, and I have a whole lot of training in this because I'm interested in it. I'm going to talk about my longevity program, but it ties into this because you can, as consumers, you can go out and go get a whole bunch of tests. Crystal said that, right? You can go get tests anywhere. Anyone will sell you a test. Right? But what do you do with that test? And does that test add value? Right? For the longest time, I did not see the value of 23andMe. Okay? Or those DNA tests. Why? Why in the world would I want to know that I had the ApoB4 gene that would increase my risk of Alzheimer's by 10 times when I knew there was nothing I could do about it? It would just stress me out for the rest of my life. And not even guarantee me getting Alzheimer's. It just increased my risk, right? And so the reason that I say that is that testing is a double-edged sword. You need to get the proper tests because there are hundreds of thousands of tests. I mean, if you just look at DNA, there are tens of companies that will sell you a DNA test. But what do you do with that test and what value does it provide you that is actionable? And that requires, unfortunately, someone who has the training and the interest to be able to guide you through that journey. And it's not, unfortunately, most of the time going to be your family doctor because they just don't have that training. Their training is in the public system to deal with disease because that's what we were trained to do. And that's what I was trained to do. So I would say in my public practice, 90% of my patients have diabetes, heart disease, cardiovascular disease like stroke, obesity, smoke, 90%. But that's what I deal with. That's disease. Are they interested in prevention? No.
So your private clinic is dealing with prevention, and your public clinic is dealing with patients that come to you for general practice things.
Correct. And I never mix them.
So it's a completely different thing. It's not that you're a medical doctor at Ageless doing the public system.
Correct.
So everything is a fee for service.
Correct. Everything is private paid. And again, just because MSP will not just slap my wrist.
How do you compare to like a TELUS Health from that perspective?
So TELUS Health, for those who may or may not know, was sued by MSP and lost. And that was because they were providing primary care for a fee. They were providing for $10,000 initiation and say $4,000 to $5,000 a year. They were providing you with access to a doctor for primary care. And again, I don't really want to get into this. I know all of this stuff too, but that's not really part of the conversation. But that's generally very different. All that I do at Ageless is outside of publicly funded services. Yes.
I just want to say, I haven't come to see you yet, but I'm in the process of doing all my hormone testing. I've seen naturopath years before. She didn't do nearly the testing. I see what I'm getting tested for through you. My boyfriend and many of our friends see you and have nothing but amazing results. So that's why I'm going, because my hormones are whacked. But I know he's great, because I know many of my boyfriend and a lot of our friends see him. So I don't think, like, even if it is a cost, it's worth it. Like, it's your life.
Yeah. And I love your transparency, right? Like, you say what you can't and won't do, right? And it is separate and it's paid for. And if that's our choice, right, at least we know that instead of, you know, what other doctors do.
Like, you can go spend $100 a month at Starbucks, or you can, spend $107 a month on yourself.
Yeah,
So,
start adding up the cost of lots of wine.
like, the reality, I know it sucks. not covered, but it is what it
Figure out what you
is.
can
So-
afford.
You know, and also all the supplements and all the shit I was trying to solve it naturally, and the cost of that compared to just figuring it out and then just and then that cost, it's like it didn't hit like the actual treatments afterwards were so affordable and manageable once that heavy lift was done. And I'm like, yeah, it's like, you know, your bill is your house, right? Like, so you gotta do a renovation, you gotta figure out what you can and can't do, but it's just, but the other thing I will say is like, I've gone through such a transformation and now I'm getting to the point where I'm so healthy that I've had another issue come up with gut health, which is from years of, I know where it's all caused from over the years. It just kind of came to your head. I think my body's so healthy now. It's just like, hey, me now. And the doctor that they have is a specialist who's done so much over the last 20 years. And he's designed a system where he goes, okay, we're going to try this, and it's going to cost you $20 to get this probiotic, and you're going to take it for 30 days, and then we're going to do this test, and we're going to try these two things together. Not super expensive before we pay for any test. I'm also going to know in the first 30 days if you even have these symptoms and nothing's working, then we can treat you for this specifically and move you into other tests after that 2-week cycle. So like they're thinking about how much it costs because they want to maintain you as a patient long term. So Ageless is trying to make you that this a lifestyle that you can afford and that you can continue it versus like one hit, grab cash and then leave you on your own, which I think is something that's unfortunately.
One of the things I just want to say about that, because testing is important, and you'll go and you see people, and all they want to do is test you, right? I am exquisitely cognizant of cost for my patients, and as the medical director and as a practitioner myself, I always make sure that costs are that testing is at minimum. I don't excessively test you. Because it doesn't make sense. Okay, if a test won't add value, I will not test it because I don't want to. I don't make money on tests. I don't do these tests myself and make a whole bunch of money on it. I'm not a testing company. Sorry, Leah.
So as Crystal was saying, I'm here from Alberta, and I've seen True Balance, which is very similar to this. So I've used it a few times. So I'm just curious what one could expect through going through your program. So you get your blood work done. Is it then a personal visit? How's your follow-up? How does that look? How often do you retest?
Yeah.
And you prescribe, I'm assuming.
Correct. So usually, for hormones, it takes usually 3 months to balance. Okay, and if you see patients too soon, before 3 months, what you end up with is a roller coaster. Okay, because before things have stabilized, you start making adjustments, and so before you get this huge oscillations, and it just gets bigger. Ideally, it's every 3 months in the beginning, but I found that patients are rather excited about the program, and so to wait 3 months is long, and so I usually see them at the 2.5 month mark. Now, it takes some time to get stable because every person is different, okay? That's why it's a very personalized care. It isn't like go take 20 milligrams of, citalopram, which is an antidepressant, and it works for everybody. Everyone's gonna start on 20. No, your dose is gonna be different than your dose is gonna be different than your dose, and it's important, and I think medically moral, to make sure that the dose that I'm giving you is the right dose for you. And I get this all the time, mostly from my men who say, oh yeah, my buddy in the gym, he takes this dose. Yeah, and that's your buddy at the gym, right? His goals are not only different than your goals, but his body is different than your body. And so 3 months, and then once things are stable, I always see patients every 6 months. And the reason for it, it's not a money grab, it is because people's bodies change, right? Life continues after you get your hormones balanced. And as much as I write a prescription to say, get rid of stress, it doesn't happen. And so something always happens, right? A separation, a child's death, a sick parent, job loss, new job, bad manager, you name it. And all of those things, as we talked about, they affect your cortisol. They're going to affect your hormonal cascade. So can we say, I've got patients who say, well, can you just see me every year? I mean, sure, it's kind of irresponsible. So stable, 6 months.
Okay, and do you do like, what, one-on-one personal visits? Because for me, it's all phone consultation.
Yeah. I mean, we do whatever is convenient for patients. So, and because we have 3 locations and soon to expand, the goal is that your chart follows you, right? So if you happen to be here in Langley and you're vacationing in Kelowna, you're gonna spend the summer there, you go see a Kelowna patient. And you want to see someone in person, you can go see someone in Kelowna. Same with aesthetics, right? So if you're looking for aesthetic procedures and you had it done here in Langley and you're like, oh, in Kelowna you need a touch-up, you get it done in Kelowna, right? Your chart follows you everywhere.
I have a comment on the year, so I was at an executive coaching session and there was a doctor there talking about the health, like how longevity healthcare impacts from the US. And he's like, you guys all run businesses, you're entrepreneurs, if you understand that, would you check in on your accounting once a year? Would you check in on your business, like how your business is operating once a year? Why would you check in on your health once a year? So just thinking about managing yourself, because you would manage things that are really important to you, that are vital. Your health should be just as important as your business or all those other parts of your life that you don't just do once a year.
Hopefully more important.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what is a bioidentical hormone? If traditional hormone therapy is Premarin or whatever you call it, what's a bioidentical hormone? Is it supplements? Is it?
No, so bioidentical hormones. So prometrium actually is a bioidentical progesterone because it looks chemically the same. You can get that compounded because prometrium is an immediate release. So sometimes people feel a bit too because it releases when you ingest it, it releases its entire compound right away. So you get this spike in your blood. Whereas sustained release is something like, for instance, for people, and it's a compounded progesterone, again, bioidentical, very similar to prometrium, but a sustained release. That has to be compounded, not by me, by the pharmacy, by a compounding pharmacy, and that allows the levels to be more gradual. So you don't get this huge spike, you get a more gradual absorption of the medication that lasts longer. Okay, and so that's one. Estrogen, Premarin is the oral, and then estrogen would be biased, which is 2 estrogens, which is estriol and estradiol, which is E2 and E3, and it's a compounded. Again, I would say probably 50% of the medications that I prescribe are compounded drugs.
Okay, but when you're prescribing those drugs, is that the same as taking a other doctor prescribed whatever you call the horse thing?
Regular HRT,
Yeah.
No.
hormone replacement.
Is that the same thing?
Bioidentical.
Yeah, hormone replacement. If you were from a
Totally
other
different.
doctor, they gave you hormone replacement, you go to the pharmacy and then it's covered, correct?
Yes,
So when you prescribe these other hormone replacements, bioidentical.
yes.
Is that
Are they covered? Through prometrium is. Yeah, and extended medical mostly does, depending on someone's extended medical.
And then can you comment on how you would, if somebody is low in estrogen, or I guess high in estrogen, or I don't know,
Yep.
think about estrogen, if they have a high risk of HER2 receptive breast cancer.
Yeah. So I was just at a longevity conference, and there are studies coming out. So the WHI was this women's health initiative. I'm not going to bore you guys with too much details, but I'm just going to tell you quickly. This huge study in the 90s, and 70,000 people changed the way hormones were given because it said if you gave women hormones, you increase their risk, you help with their bones, okay, but you may increase the risk of heart disease, maybe not, but you increase the risk of breast cancer and ovarian cancer, okay, and you increase the risk of clot. And so everybody stopped giving hormones around the early 2000s, okay? And then they started looking at this a little bit closer as they followed people more. End result is, after more decades of following the same women and following the data, shows that it depends on how you give the medication. So balance, bioidentical, and for estrogen, you should be giving it topically. And so the question specifically about breast cancer risk, as long as there is no active breast cancer, it is safe to use in a balanced format, okay, with some progesterone. Again, the idea being when you look at the incidence of breast cancer, when do most women get it? When they're menopausal. They tend not to get it when they're premenopausal, where you have lots of estrogen. Okay? It just so happens that the breast cancer came from a breast cell that had estrogen receptors on it. And that's what happens, right? Just like testosterone doesn't cause prostate cancer. But if you had prostate cancer and I gave you testosterone, I'd be sued. Okay? Because it is an accelerant, not the cause. Just like gas doesn't cause fire.
Yeah, that study was also flawed because the large percentage of the women in the study were very old, well past menopause, right?
Right.
So, which is
Lots.
Statistically, your chances of getting breast cancer are increased just based on age.
Yes.
I hate that study.
Yes.
So, but it single-handedly changed women's health care.
All I know is my mom went on hormone replacement therapy, and within 6 months she had breast cancer.
Yes, and it's hard to look at those anecdotes. My mom gives it to me all the time. It's hard because they're so temporarily related that you want to make them related. But I'm saying that they are not necessarily related.
So do you, before you even give any hormones, you're giving bioidentical hormones, right?
Yeah.
Before you do any of that, is everybody getting tested? Like, are you getting mammograms?
So yes, as a requirement, everyone's mammogram and pap smears have to be up to date.
But what you're prescribing is bioidentical hormones.
Correct.
And what if you go your whole life without taking any hormones?
You will live. Not as well. Pardon me?
Will you end up balancing out at some point anyway?
No. So I just had this conversation actually. Yeah, I just had this conversation actually with another lady. So women, beyond being just more complicated than men, they have this eventuality that always occurs, which is you go through menopause. Men don't. Some of us, a small percentage of us, go through andropause. A small percentage. But for the most part, andropause, which is like male menopause. So for the most part, our testicles continue to make testosterone well into our 70s and 80s and 90s. But women, they all go through this eventuality. I don't know what you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, it's a fact. And so will you ever get balance again? No. The other thing I didn't even touch on is that recent studies show that the brain, women's brain, and especially certain parts of the brain, like the hippocampus where memory is made and stored, is full of estrogen receptors. Okay? And so memory loss, memory deterioration, mental sharpness, mood, all estrogen related. Okay? So when you think about it, again, around the time of menopause, if you're going through it, or your parents, or your mom or your aunts going through it, just think about whether around that time in their late 40s to early 50s, you notice a change in their mood and their personality, right? And I tell you, most people would say, yep. And most women, even happy women, will admit that they feel less happy. Okay, they may not feel sad, but they certainly feel less happy. And how do we treat it? With some antidepressants. I'm just kidding. We don't treat it with antidepressants. We don't, because they don't really work. So I'm gonna tell you quickly about longevity, which is to go answer your question, which to me is like the next level of excitement, okay? And that is looking at your DNA. I know I told you about this 23andMe, why would anyone want to look? But very briefly, it's a complex topic. I'm gonna try to, I hope I do some justice here. Your DNA is like a book, but a book without, if you took all the spaces and all the punctuation out, that's your DNA, okay? Now your epigenetics is how that DNA is interpreted and produced and transcribed. Now that, you can't change the letters, okay? Because the DNA is built. You can sort of, but for the most part you can't. But the epigenetics can change. And what does that mean? That means that there are these proteins or how you transcribe. THE is the, but THERE is there. Completely different word, completely different meaning, but still the same set of letters. Okay? And epigenetics and methylation status is how those letters are read. And that can be changed. And that has been shown to change because when you looked at when they did the first studies of epigenetics in the Jews in the concentration camps, they saw a significantly higher level of PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Kind of makes sense, right? Their DNA didn't necessarily change, but the way their DNA was expressed changed, and it affected their well-being. Makes sense, right? And the reverse is now true. Because those negative impacts can make negative consequences to your health, positive impacts can make positive changes to the way your DNA is interpreted. And that is exciting. So when you're talking about like how do you know what you're at risk for and what to do, that's the future. And that is the program that I'm introducing in longevity, okay, which is looking at your DNA, epigenetics, your methylation status mostly, and seeing like the book is there, how is the book interpreted, and how do we modify those risks so that the book can be read, so Harry Potter can be read as Harry Potter. That's interesting. Any other questions? Pardon me? No. No. Is that another epigenetic DNA company? Maybe it's a DNA company. I don't really like DNA companies that much. Again, it's not about testing, right? So you can go and look up like DNA testing or epigenetics, and you go on Google, and I bet you'd get like 20 hits right away. And you can go and you order all these tests because they're direct to consumer, and you get these stuff, and you're like, woo, no. What does this mean? How do you navigate that? And how good is that test? How useful is that test? That's something that you always have to be thinking about.
I'm 93. According to my test, based on how I read it, and then I went and had it properly read. I was like, oh, so.
But that's a separate thing. That's genetics and epigenetics. I think that's what I'm really passionate about because that's going to give me the tools that I need to really make a difference. Not that hormones don't make a difference. Hormones really make a difference, by the way. But that's like step one.
So can you explain that whole, what you just said, that procedure? You make an appointment, you get your testing done, you come and see you, you go, oh, you're low in this, you're high in that, let's balance your hormones by giving you these bioidentical hormones, which are pharmaceuticals, is that right?
Yep. And supplements, yep. But but if you want like an outline of it, Mehek in the back, she can send you all the stuff. We're very transparent with our pricing. You know, she gives you step by step and what to expect. She'll give you a turnaround time of from the time that you say, yep, I want to commit to this. I want to take a personal step to my personal health. She can give you an outline of what that looks like from the day you register to the day you see me.
So a regular doctor can prescribe bioidentical hormones?
They could.
Oh, they can?
Yep.
But they just don't know enough about them? They don't, what?
Well, no, I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious here, but it would be the same as like, I can build a house. Would you like me to build your house? Probably not. Because I probably wouldn't really know what I was doing. I mean, I can buy a hammer and I can get a nail and I can hammer a bunch of stuff. I'm actually not bad with a nail and hammer. But the same with your GP. I mean, they'd be doing something that they have no training in. Could they legally do it? Yes. But what? Because they don't have training on what to do in terms of following, in terms of just like, yeah, just like, yeah.
I have asked and asked and asked and asked, and I was just told.
Yeah. So like chemotherapy, right? Chemotherapy is a great example. Not every physician is comfortable or actually competent in administering chemotherapy, right? You have to go to an oncologist. You wouldn't want your GP to prescribe you chemotherapy because they wouldn't know what to do.
I mean,
No, I would never wish. They're useless.
GPs, there's, the thing is like, NHS, they don't train the doctors at barely any of these things, consults or women's health or endometriosis. Like, in my own journey, I've learned the doctors have very little knowledge about endometriosis, how to spot it, how to identify it, how to help you treat it.
Because there's no research on women.
Well, there's no money to be made, and this is the thing. It's like there's no they can make billions of dollars in cancer treatment and chemotherapy, but there's no money to help. They're not making any profit.
So I'm not
There's no initiative for them to do it because they can't make any profits on it. Like they don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's how I feel about it. Anyway.
I have the utmost respect for my GP colleagues. Yeah,
I
yeah.
really respect and I think what you're saying is amazing, and I'm totally going to sign up to
Yeah.
see you because I think you could be someone who's involved in family. Which, it's like, you look your whole life.
Yeah. So I'm gonna if there's no more last minute burning question or last second burning questions, are there any actually? No, if they're not, I want to thank you all for attending. Hopefully I was able to help give you some bits of information. And if you're interested in more information, signing up, or you want to just chat, you can speak to Mehak. She's in the back. And she'll be happy to get your contact information, and we can send you as much stuff or as little stuff as you want. Thank you.